Hey everyone, welcome to the Parts Girl podcast. I have Chuck Hartle, one of the founders of PartsEdge, here with me today. I'm excited to interview him and ask him some questions. So welcome, Chuck.
Hi, Kaylee.
Hi. So I wanted to get you back on the show because we're in Q4, and I feel like we're getting a lot of requests for customer pay analysis. And I want to dive deeper in why that's important and what that really looks like. So let's start with, what is a customer pay analysis?
Well, that's where we go in and pull all part sales related to customer pay, eliminating out internal and warranty, and really focusing on, if you're using a matrix, how often it's really used with the individual dealership. Yeah, we've seen as little as 2% to 20%, a couple higher, but for the most part, it averages out. Only about 15% of the parts anymore are actually being matrix. And a lot of times we get requests where they say, bump our matrix. We want to get our gross profit up. And it has so little of the parts are actually being matrixed anyway. My experience is I tend to see unrealistic matrix tables that almost sale-proof some of the captive parts, thinking that raising the matrix is going to increase the gross. And that's why we do the analysis to show them it's not your matrix. The matrix, where it does work, generates quite a bit of gross, but the problem really is in maintenance items. They haven't raised the price and things like that. So doing a deep forensic look at that is really, it's an eye-opener for a lot of dealerships because they just didn't realize that.
Yeah, because I know that I hear that a lot where they come back and just want to bump the matrix and it just doesn't work that way. And would you say that the sources play a huge role in the pricing and making sure, when you do make those tweaks, that you're not tweaking everything?
The sources and the price codes, a couple of things that we see a lot of times when we start to do analysis is we look at their override reports. And the counter people, the parts advisors or the service advisors, they're going in and changing labor types, which updates the price code, or they override the sale price. And unbeknownst a lot of times to management, they just didn't realize that was happening that often. So, one of the things when you break down your inventory granularly into more sources, you can have multiple pricing, multiple matrix tables, and so forth to accomplish the goals.
That makes sense. Wow. And what would you say to someone who, is trying to break out their inventory a little bit more with the sources? And, is there any advice you would give on where to start with breaking it down and looking at the pricing and making all those changes?
Basically, any DMS will allow you to break out what you want captive, what you want specifically priced. Setting that up, really, it starts with creating a source, getting with us or getting with your DMS vendor to make sure the settings and the price codes work properly. That's what we're experts in. One of the problems that we've ran into over the last year and a half, and I've told this story a dozen times, but over the last year and a half, the manufacturers have really increased the cost of parts. In other words, there's been a lot of appreciation at the dealership level from the manufacturer. But what we see is they were selling air filters for $32.95, and they have been for the last 3 years, but yet the price on those air filters says increase by 15, 20%, but yet they're still selling the air filter at $32.95, and now their gross has gone down because they didn't move, the sale price up with the increase in cost.
And how can dealerships stay ahead of that? Do they get they don't get notified, right? When everything changes or increases?
Well, they do, Kaylee. And typically what happens is you don't really look at it. You go to a management report and it says, oh, hey, our inventory just appreciated X amount of dollars. Well, what you really got to do is go look at the appreciation depreciation reports and see what increased on the individual end, what source they were involved with, what type of product was it. A lot of maintenance items increase, and that's where we've seen receding gross profit on customer pay is that, they haven't gone in and made any adjustments to a lot of their maintenance items and their grosses have gone down. Hence, that's why they need to increase.
How often should they be reviewing this? Is this something that should happen once a month, once a quarter?
Well, once you make a change, you always, if you expect, you got to inspect. And, looking at it, if you throw a new increase out there, you want to see what it's done. I just recently had a dealer that they were at about 35% gross profit. We made some tweaks and adjustments. Then they came back to me at the end of the month and says, it just doesn't seem like it's working. And I just went out yesterday and pulled the analysis and they went from 35% to 40.9.
Wow.
And I said, what are you guys looking at? Because I see a tremendous increase there, almost 5% in what got tweaked. And they went, well, we would have never figured that out. It just seemed like we weren't making any headway.
Well, and were they looking in the wrong place or it's just because why did they feel that way that they weren't?
No, it was more of a gut feeling instead of relying on a report.
Got it.
And so that's where I went out and pulled the same report over the last 30 days, the month of September. And I said, guys, a 5% increase in gross profit from 35.5 up to 40.9. That's a pretty healthy increase.
That is. Oh, and just about a month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the one thing I always preface, and I bring this up so many times and I have in my workshops and whatnot when I'm dealing with pricing is, and I tell this story all the time and it bears repeating. I hired a fixed ops consultant back in 96, 97 when I had just taken over service. And we went through a lot of different things in service, but we got to parts and he says, how's your matrix working on? Well, we're at about 39%, and he said, well, where would you like to be? I said, well, I'd love to get up around 41, 42%. I think that'd be great. And we implemented a new matrix. We played with it for a while. And after the first month, I went up a full percent. And I'll never forget, he called me up and he said, asked me how things were working on the service side. Then he said, what about your matrix? I said, you know what? We got over 40%. We raised it almost a full percent. And he goes, I only got one question for you. I go, what's that? He goes, did anybody complain? I said, no. And he goes, bump it a couple of percent again in each escalator category. And I went, okay. And did it again. We got over 41% the next month. He called me up and I knew the first question out of his mouth. He goes, did anybody complain? I go, no. And so I did that for 3 successive months. I got up to 42%. I didn't overprice anything. I wanted to be fair to my customers. And once I got to 42%, he asked if anybody complained. I said, no, they didn't. And he goes, bump it again. I go, you know what? At 42%, I'm really happy. I feel real good at this point. At least I know what to do. And the whole point of that story, and this is where we get stuck in ruts at dealerships. And we see this at, over 300 dealerships day in and day out, is it's like pricing is written in stone. Nobody wants to mess with it. No one wants to play with it, or tweak it. And, what I'm trying to tell everybody here, that's why they call it suggested retail and whatnot. If people are complaining about the pricing of parts, you can always adjust it back, but give it a shot. Try to get your grosses up. You should never have to make an excuse to make a fair gross profit in customer pay, bottom line. And that means tweaking it often. And so to go way back to the question you asked, Kaylee, how often should you look at it? If you make adjustments, monthly, at least quarterly minimum. to check things out, but don't be afraid to tweak and adjust menu items. And, a lot of times, and I bring this up because I'll never forget this story. I was doing a webinar for Dealer's Edge, and we were talking about this subject, and I said, if your brake pads are $69.95, and of course, this was like 10, 12 years ago. I said, if your brake pads are $69.95, make them $74.95. Raise up just $5. And I had a service manager who cut in, said, if I made my brake pads, if I raised them $5, I wouldn't sell any brake jobs. And I went, wow. And having been a fixed ops director, I actually told the guy, and he got upset and we had to cut him off. But I said, if the difference between a quality brake job at a car dealership is $5, you got the wrong service advisors. They don't know how to sell. Because, that's the type of thing that we see a lot is the service department. A lot of these menu items, they turn every maintenance item into a loss leader. It used to be loss leaders was, we'll do an oil change, for $19.95. And the ultimate goal was to get the service advisors and the technicians to upsell things to make the money back, right? Well, as time has gone on, every maintenance item, oil filters, air filters, brake pads, belts, fluids, everything's a loss leader. And that's where you make your minimum grosses. And that's what needs to be tweaked to get gross profit up.
That makes sense. And how would you recommend working with the team on trusting the pricing? Because that's the other aspect of it. You make the tweaks, but then people are still overriding because they're not trusting it. How do you work with your team to overcome that?
Well, a lot of times in the service department, when they put out coupon specials, they hate to change it because it takes time and energy to update the coupons with new pricing. But, the bottom line is you want to be fair. I bring up, and this is a perfect example where, and again, this is dating me 25 years ago, but Chrysler finally came out with a line of brake pads that, with the exception of the diesel, they all had this quality brake pad that was, and I still remember the list price, $48.20. Well, what I did is I analyzed, we went and shopped our competition and not other Chrysler dealers. We actually shopped the aftermarket, Goodyear's, the brake depots and whatnot. And we found out to do a front brake job on a Chrysler product, they were charging anywhere from $169 to about $219. Well, what we did is we looked at an effective labor rate, for a technician, what it would take. We made the brake pads, which list was $48.20. We made them $60. We took the labor rate and the time to turn the rotors and whatnot, and we set that to where the labor type, the op code, and the parts sold at $199.95. We went from doing 30 brake jobs a month between our two stores. We had a Dodge and a Jeep store side by side. We went to doing over 300. Wow. We were in lateral support groups. I had to go out and buy 4 new brake lathes and put them where the different teams were. But I had everybody hanging brakes. And the reason that it worked so successfully, it was a very fair price. We made money at it, but the service advisors could quote it for $199.95 with confidence and know it was going to price that way. And I discovered something that I would have never thought, that when you can lock in a price, service advisors will sell it all day. And we were very competitive. And it was just one of those things. We applied that with a couple other products like a transmission service and so forth. And so that's the thing is, don't be afraid to make decent grosses. If you sacrifice it on the service end, or on the parts end for service to make more labor, for me, it was walking a fine line after being a parts manager and understanding service to make it work on both ends so both departments are profitable. That's what's really the key to this. And it's a great, I'll tell you, if you do an analysis, it's an eye opener, but I, I can't think of any dealership that we've worked with that isn't leaving money on the table because
Yeah.
they just don't know how to properly analyze it and break it down daily.
And it's more so because there's just so many, because the DMSs don't really produce that properly, right? Like, or it's not easy to find. You have to go in several different places to figure it out, correct?
Sure. And, this has really come up a lot in the last 2 years I can sum it up in 2 words: warranty uplift. Everybody wants to get a good warranty markup. And, it seems, and that's why there's companies out there like Armitage and Dynatron and whatnot, that they analyze and try to get you a higher labor rate and a higher parts markup rate. And they've got to find a sampling of 100 repair orders to prove this out to get the markup with the manufacturer. And it takes a lot of work to do it. And a lot of dealerships have just never built any type of report, especially on the parts side, to be able to do that. And believe it or not, they all have that ability to be able to pull it and look at the gross profit percentage and really do a deep dive into where the gross profit is coming from.
Yeah. So it's there. It's just not easy to find.
Well, and again, these are just experiences. I went and did a 20 group in Tucson, and it was some GM dealers. And again, this was back in 2008, 2009. And I had 16 dealers in the room, and I happened to walk in. I was going to do it on inventory control, and they were talking about their matrix. They were sharing their matrix. And so, of course, the moderator looks at me and says, "Hey, Chuck, what's the best matrix?" And I have to tell you, Kaylee, working with, somewhere around 300, 350 dealerships day in and day out, I can tell you, literally, there's 350 different matrices out there. Nobody's the same. But anyway, I backed up and I asked a question of them. I had them break out their composite book. And I said, let's go around the room. And on the whiteboard, I wrote down what their gross profit was in customer pay out of the composite book. And basically, I had from about 34% up to one guy. One guy was at 40%. And so, I said, I've got your answer. And they're all like, wow, this is great. And I said, shut down your matrix and sell everything at straight retail. And it brought the room to dead silence. And even a couple of people under their breath were going, who is this guy? He's supposed to be an expert? And the moderator says, can you justify why you just said that? And I said, yeah, I can. Because at that time, markup on parts was a 40% profit margin, which in calculation, it's cost plus 67 is a 40% profit margin. I said, one thing I could tell you guys, you're all sitting here basically under 40%. You're all using a matrix. And I said, so shut down your matrix and sell everything at straight retail. At least you'd be at 40%. Well, that got their attention. And I said, so now let's back into it. And a lot of times, and this is where the deep dive looking at different labor types and whatnot that are associated with this menu pricing, as I backed into it, I said, what are you menu pricing? Are you running, employee sales? Just about every dealer has some type of employee labor type, and they sell the parts at cost plus 10, cost plus 15. That gets clocked under customer pay. Fleet discounts get clocked under the customer pay. And once you take it all, now that's where you can break it out and go, what's really being matrix versus what's not being matrix, because it all falls into that one sale account. And that's why you need to dive into it and take a good look at it, to really effectively make a difference to get your grosses up. It's not, everybody thinks it's the matrix. And I'm here to tell you that fallacy is gone. We just did an analysis on a customer 2 weeks ago, and they couldn't believe it when they saw that less than 2% of their parts were being matrix.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, yeah, I told them, I said, you might as well shut down your matrix because, 2% of your sales, why? So we effectively went in and worked a few things and actually tweaked the matrix. And we actually took, their internal rate and we bumped that. They were paying straight list and we made it list plus 2. We matrixed the internal rate just 2% to try and get a little bit more out. So, you try and get that warranty uplift. That's great. But the other areas, internal and customer pay, you want to look at the areas that are really weak, certain part numbers that you're making very low grosses on, and try and tweak those up a little bit. That's what makes the difference to get your gross profit up.
That makes sense. Would you say that as we're, wrapping up the end of the year, is there anything else that you're noticing that we're getting a lot of requests for, or certain things that are standing out to you that maybe not a lot of people are thinking about?
No, Kaylee, if anything, there's obviously on the inventory side, we need to reduce idle inventory,
Yeah.
The obsolete inventory or forced stock. But really the biggest request we're getting more than anything really tends to be about pricing. Obviously right now, the big thing is, the strike,
Yeah.
for GM and Chrysler and UAW. Hopefully by the time this broadcasts, the strike will be settled. But, there's a little silver lining on that, switching gears a little bit. As we look at the monthly analysis that we do for our clients, is we notice that some of their forced stock and obsolescence is actually going down during the strike because there's a lot of D2D sales going on. Instead of them relying on the depots and buying parts from the depots directly, dealers are buying from each other. And some of this idle inventory, it's almost like they're swapping with each other. And, that if there's only one little mini silver lining in this whole thing, it's that the dealers are buying, idle inventory from each other.
And before the strike, they would get penalized for doing that, correct?
Right. They had, for lack of a better term, using GM, dealer purchase loyalty and things like that. They've kind of shut that down now. In fact, the manufacturer even is supplying lists saying, hey, we've got needs here. So the manufacturers, even in some cases, some of them are facilitating D2D sales to help the dealers take care of their customers. So that's, there's no good thing about a strike. You don't want to run out of anything, but, the D2D sales is actually helping reduce some of their idle capital, which never would have before.
No, that's a good point because, a lot of dealerships have a lot of idle inventory, and being able to swap it is just kind of a no-brainer.
Whoa, you bet. Everybody was trying to build up a 3 or 4 month supply and, on maintenance stuff and stuff like that. But, the bottom line is, it's terrible. They're doing a lot more work buying amongst each other, doing dealer swaps, but it is to a slight degree helping that idle inventory. So there you go. The only little positive spin I could put on this whole strike. So,
yeah. Well, hopefully by the time this goes out, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I have a feeling it is. I'm starting to hear little things that, they're about ready to settle, so fingers crossed, there you go.
Okay, so just to wrap up too, is there anything that you're most excited for in the future? It could be about PartsEdge, it could be about parts, it could just be about anything. What are you most excited for?
The manufacturers just keep making it harder and harder, to do business. I find it exciting every day I wake up, I learn something new. That's what I enjoy about this business. Different manufacturers, different programs, playing the game, to survive, making fair grosses. That's what excites me every day when I wake up, is, the mundane stuff. I don't want to say it bores me, but a good challenge is doing like a pricing analysis. It's just a great eye opener. And I love when people finally discover, hey, we figured out a new way to do business, make a decent gross profit and spread it all the way across, not just trying to over matrix captive items, looking at menu items, looking at internal rates, things like that. I guess that's the thrill for me sometimes when I do the analysis. Oh my gosh, we're really terrible at this. And it's not that they're terrible. It's just following the canned traditions that are out there just don't work anymore.
No.
So you want to think outside the box and look at something without ripping a certain amount of customers off, making them try to carry the weight of all the other departments. There's a good way to do it and a right way to do it and a fair way to make a good gross profit, bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. And you definitely enjoy working with our clients on, just that discovery of like, this is what we can help with and showing them the data. Yeah. Because that data is really hard to calculate and get and see. Once you see it, then you can make those changes.
Well, like my wife says, she says, I'm an accountant wearing dealership clothes, She's always said that. She said, you should have been a CPA. And I'm not even close to that. So anybody listen to this, don't think I'm a CPA. But understanding source accounting, pricing, and stuff like that, it's all about numbers, and I love crunching.
Yes, you definitely do. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, Chuck. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this because it does get brought up a lot. And pricing is very important. I think, like we said,
it really
it's
is
more important than inventory control, I would imagine. But they kind of go hand in hand. So
you just said it. They go hand in hand. They really do.
They do. Well, anything that you want to add to wrap up or?
Nope. Happy holidays and good luck and good selling.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay. Bye, Kaylee.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. PartsEdge, the power tool for your parts department. We hope you're leaving feeling motivated, challenged, and inspired.